Can you believe they're going around bragging about the 1-year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act? It really is. I mean, the audacity is truly unbelievable. In fact, of course, Mayor Lucas here in town was at the White House 2 days ago to celebrate, air quotes, the Inflation Reduction Act's 1-year anniversary. We had the mayor on yesterday to talk about that. It was a lively, spirited back and forth. If you missed that conversation, it is up on the podcast. Want to welcome on our friend Daniel Turner, Power of the Future. He does a great job covering what's actually happening when it comes to energy in this country and around the world. Daniel, good morning. Something tells me the only people that should be celebrating the Inflation Reduction Act, at least one of the people celebrating, is the Chinese Communist Party. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. This is a huge giveaway, close to $1 trillion to the Chinese Communist Party. It's an enormous transfer of wealth. And look, every time Biden talks about how this is an investment and we're investing, Senator Schumer the other day was saying how it's close to $500 billion of investment. Well, what are they doing? They're buying things. They're buying wind. They're buying solar, EVs, batteries. But the vast majority of them, more than 80% of it, is controlled or manufactured by communist China. So we're just sending a boatload of money there for crappy products. And there's nothing great about that. There's nothing to be proud of. People say we're going to create all these green jobs by doing this. But the best example is likening it to IKEA furniture makers, right? Would you say that you created a job because you're sitting there on the floor with all those little tiny screws and wrenches assembling a desk? Well, no, IKEA is still made in Sweden, right? It's still a Swedish company, and that's what we're doing. We're buying Chinese crap and then hiring Americans to ratchet them all together and saying this is a job. So, no, there's nothing to celebrate this, not the money, not the waste, not the Chinese communist investment, that's for sure.
Well, what about, I am stunned that they're rolling this out this week in the way that they are bragging about this Inflation Reduction Act. When you think about all the coverage of this Chinese Communist Party angle is a good one. What else has been overlooked in terms of how we actually need to perceive what has come out of this, air quotes, Inflation Reduction Act?
Well, even just the fact that they call it that, and Biden the other day joked and said they probably should have named it something else because it's really just an investment in green technology. John Podesta, the Washington swamp dweller par excellence, who is the one in charge of managing these $1 trillion worth of funds, said the same thing. This is really just an investment in getting carbon out of the atmosphere, which, we got to hope they don't get too much carbon out of the atmosphere because life will cease to exist. But here's me talking science, so let's avoid that in a political conversation. But the fact that they call it the Inflation Reduction Act is a big lie, and they had to do that because inflation was running at 9.5%, close to 10%. Americans were suffering. And inflation was very unpopular. They could have called it the Children and Puppies Act. They could have called it, the Cure Cancer Act, but we all know Biden already cured cancer. So they can't call it that. That's done. So they just lie to the American people. They knew if they called it the Green New Deal, they would not have had the votes. They would not have been able to dupe Joe Manchin into voting for it. So they had to lie, and they had to call it something that the American people would be more palatable to the American people.
Daniel Turner, Power of the Future, is joining us on KCMO. Yesterday, here in Kansas City, the city proposing legislation that could bring a solar energy farm to town. And, of course, when you look at some of the quotes around this, the goal is to reduce utility costs and power a third of Kansas City homes with green energy. That's what leadership in this city is saying. The city plans on building this project that will be as big as 3,000 acres and hoping to break ground early next spring. What would you warn them about, Daniel, with the fantasies that they're promoting here in town this week on that front?
Yeah, that's something I've been doing a lot of as the Biden money is getting doled out to these green energy companies. I've been doing town halls all around the country, one not far from you in Nebraska with a similar project, just to say, look, I'm not saying vote for it, vote against it. I'm just saying let's have a full conversation about what this means. If you're a landowner right now and you're listening to this radio show, First of all, you can contact me at daniel@powerthefuture.com, and I'll show up in your town and do the town hall. But if you're a landowner, here's something that you have to consider before you sign this lease, because they do need your land. 3,000 acres are not available readily, so they need land from private citizens. Before you sign that lease, here's a simple question. If it's solar, are you only getting paid when it's generating electricity, which means what happens when there's 1.5 feet of snow? Are you getting paid that day? If the answer is no, who cleans the snow off of those solar panels? Are you responsible for doing it, or is someone else responsible for doing it? If a tornado or a hailstorm were to blow through there and blow that farm to smithereens, and it leaches toxic chemicals, because when solar panels break, they do leach toxic chemicals. So when you have 3,000 acres of broken solar panels leaching toxic chemicals, who does the cleanup? Does the solar company, or do they say, well, that's your land, pal, you're in charge of cleanup? What's the environmental impact study of 3,000 broken solar panels leaching toxic chemicals on groundwater and aquifers and farmland? Has anyone seen that independent study? Has anyone verified it? Right? These are just very simple questions that I want landowners to think about before they sign over on the dotted line, because, and I said this in all of my town halls, if you're a struggling farmer, I can totally understand you seeing this as an attractive offer. I have a farm. I'm sitting on my farm right now. Farming is brutal. It is hard. You don't make any money. I can understand the attractive offer. I would never blame you for wanting to make some money finally. But answer me this. When has anyone from D.C. ever come to you before and said, I'm going to help you make some money, pal? When has anyone ever tried to bail you out of a jam? When has anyone ever showed up in small town, rural American farmland and said, we got a solution, folks, that's going to make everybody rich? So I'd be leery before you sign anything right now.
That is so true. Daniel Turner is on KCMO. Last thing, Daniel, on a similar front, but applying to a different part of the energy sector. With this Inflation Reduction Act, I mean, I get it, too. You talk about making money. Oil and gas companies are plowing more money into subsidized green technologies. I saw in the Wall Street Journal, ExxonMobil plans to invest $7 billion in hydrogen, carbon capture, and biofuels through 2027. That's $7 billion not being invested in oil and gas. What does that mean for energy in this country going forward?
What does that mean for the future exactly of this industry, which is absolutely imperative to our quality of life? I can understand them doing it. They've got the Biden administration and the ruthlessness of its EPA, its Department of Justice, its Interior, following them, prodding them, suing them. I can totally understand the industry saying, oof, how do we just weather the storm? How do we try to make some allies so they leave us alone? But you're asking a great question. What happens to the future of this industry? It takes months and years to get wells online, to actually bring those goods into the marketplace, which ultimately increases the supply, lowers costs, etc. But they're not making the investments right now. And that means a very bleak future. It's why oil is back above 80, and soon it will be back above 90. And the Biden administration will say this is now the new normal. This is the cost of going green. One last thing on the Inflation Reduction Act. They are priding themselves that inflation is only around 3%. But don't forget, folks, that is 3% above where it was last year, which was around 9%. So inflation is not down. It's increasing at a slower rate. But anyone who goes to the grocery store, who pays a utility bill, they know that Bidenomics is an absolute failure. The only people who can pride themselves on Bidenomics working don't pay bills.
Well, you heard him give up his email address, daniel@powerthefuture.com. He's got great insights. Daniel Turner, always appreciate you joining us here in Kansas City, my friend. Thanks so much.
Thanks for letting me be long-winded, and that's an honest offer for your town hall. I would love to help these folks out before Big Green squashes them. So thank you, Pete.
You bet. Well done there. Daniel Turner, Power the Future, daniel@powerthefuture.com.